'Tis the season to be spooky, the most wonderful time of year where we embrace the things that we fear. You like that rhyme there? You like it? Anyway, this is a time where we binge horror movies, stream horror video games, listen to horror stories. Awful lot of horror. It's kind of odd when you think about it. We have this attraction to spooky things, things that scare us. Most of us have this baseline aversion to dark, macabre, grotesque, and scary things, and this is largely instinctual. I mean, we all know that. Skeletons, sharp teeth, claws, blades, and corpses all connect to things that can kill you or represent something that has been killed. However, this aversion has found its subversion in art, music, literature, and culture at large. Throughout history, there have been artists, writers, musicians, and the like who have created work that explored things which we normally avoid. Some of them are among the greatest in history and are beloved by many, which is odd when you think about it. People are paying money to see things that which they'd usually avoid, spending time out of their day. Instead of unwinding to more upbeat music, they're listening to dark music. Instead of going to see a love story or reading a love story or cute family-friendly comedy, we're reading dark poetry and horror stories instead. And let's not forget the massive amount of scary podcasts that Spotify just shoves in your face the second you log on, regardless of what it is that you normally listen to. One would think that these would be unpopular, disliked, and vilified at large, which, I mean, they are socially to an extent, depending on the situation, but these artists are still making tons of money. They still sell out shows and are trending heavily. It's as if we have this love-hate relationship with the darkness. Hi, I'm AJ. Welcome to the Art of Overthinking, and in this video, I will be discussing the beauty in darkness. Fear of the dark is common in most children, and as quiet as it's kept, many adults. Fear of the dark is often attributed to what or who is lurking within. In this, we can see that the dark can be connected to a fear of obscurity, the unknown evil that lurks within where we cannot perceive. However, darkness is not mere obscurity. Darkness is often aligned with the macabre, death, disease, and other evils. These things frighten and disgust us. This innate rejection is natural to most people. And yet it is this rejection that creates a strange attraction to those things which we would normally avoid. In regular everyday life, things like murder, corpses, and bloody hallways are bad things that we should avoid. But in art, they are edgy, creepy, and cool. All throughout history, there has been an interest in art that depicts those things that scare us. We can look back to the late 18th century with the works of Henry Fuseli and Francisco Goya. You can also look to reminders of our mortality in the Danse Macabre and Memento Mori artworks, which work to remind people of their eventual deaths, or the Vanitas, no, not that one, art which depicts the emptiness of vain pursuits in a mortal existence. These paintings often served the purpose of reminding people of their eventual deaths. They were made in periods of rampant disease, war, famine, and many other things, so death truly was everywhere. They were part of a Christian society's method of evangelism by reminding people of their eternal destinies while death waits around the corner. No, not that. And we cannot go without mentioning the works of Edgar Allan Poe, which explored the darker parts of his life and perspective and mentality, and would go on to create a literary niche which would grow into a style of its own. Many other contemporary writers at the time, and many writers preceding, would also walk in this footstep, growing the dark literary genre that would attract many people. However, all of this was made with revulsion in mind, made to be things that which we would want to avoid. It would be a long time before culture would begin to celebrate these things, as we would grow and change in our perspectives and understanding of life and existence. And like many social changes, it would begin underground. Celebration and appreciation of the dark would be in its primordial stages during the 50s with the growing popularity of horror films, particularly the monster movie. Monsters were still feared and reviled by the culture at large, but there would be a growth in interest in these monsters as youth culture would become enamored with these scary, grotesque, and strange creatures. This, along with the commercialization of Halloween and the marketing of these films as such, would begin to create a new social love and interest for things that scare us. But this would still be built on the foundation of fear instead of appreciation. Individual people had still been into dark things for a long time, but it would be around the 80s that a cultural movement would begin to grow around the dark, and that would be the goth subculture. Goth got its start around the 60s, 70s, or 80s, depending on whoever you ask. Multiple sources, you know how it goes. The first generation goth would be an offshoot mostly of post-punk, which shows in first gen goth aesthetic being basically dark punk. From then, goth would morph and change as it would grow in popularity in the US and other nations. The aesthetic of goth is essentially a subversive rebellion against a society obsessed with bright colors, corporate trendy fashion, and Christian definitions of beauty. Today, there is a wide variety of goth types and styles, from trad to pagan, tribal, Victorian, vampire, cyber, rockabilly, death rock, or corporate, military. The list goes on and on. Way more than I could ever mention. The goth subculture, at its foundation, is built on an appreciation of the dark instead of the revulsion and fear that characterized dark art and culture for centuries. That's what unites all the different types of goth. Around the same time, the metal scene would also become prevalent, with bands and fans alike exploring darker, more extreme, and edgy lyrics and imagery that would rub many a Christian mom the wrong way. Much to the Christian mom's absolute chagrin, culture would continue down its path, from cultural phenomena such as the Addams Family way back in the day, to Michael Jackson's Thriller, the Are You Afraid of the Dark, and Goosebumps. One special example that could be mentioned is the works of Tim Burton, such as The Nightmare Before Christmas and Corpse Bride, which used dark, gothic, macabre type imagery in sort of a kid-friendly sort of fashion. And as if the Christian mom couldn't get a break, cartoons on television would also soon follow suit, with shows such as Ah Real Monsters, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, to name a few. And it also bears mentioning that often a lot of these goth characters of many shows like these would often become the more popular ones for obvious reasons. The youth culture growing more and more interested in these dark things and dark styles. That poor, poor Christian mom. Well, at least video games are safe, right? 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 Oh, wait. Yeah. Well, gaming contributed a lot to our interest in the dark. Sorry, Christian mom. Video games, being an interactive medium, allow players to experience horror stories and dark things and the macabre as an active participant instead of just a passive viewer. One such game, Bloodborne, uses Victorian horror aesthetic a la Edgar Allan Poe, Tim Burton, H.P. Lovecraft, and the many influences of goth culture. The cool thing about video games is, like Bloodborne, is that they almost marry the fear of the dark and revulsion along with the celebration of the darkness that has been coming with the modern era, allowing players to face our nightmares and conquer them. The player may be forced to face zombies, necromorphs, or whatever abomination that Bloodborne decides to throw at you this time, all intent on ripping your insides out in the most brutal and overly violent ways possible as the composer is playing the most horrific and eerie music as you run down a poorly lit hallway being chased by these creatures. But, unlike most entertainment mediums, in this, you can take on the monsters and defeat them. You can conquer them. You can face your fears. No, not that. Truly, this is the beauty in darkness. This is the attraction to the macabre and the dark things. The fact that this gives you the ability to face that which scares you and possibly conquer it and overcome it. Fear of the dark is common in all of us, yet that doesn't mean that the dark is something to be feared. In fact, it is in our darkest times and scariest moments that we grow the most. If the fear of the dark is the fear of obscurity, of what we don't understand, then the answer is not to avoid that which is unknown and to remain blissfully ignorant and in a false state of peace. Instead, the answer is to uncover the obscurity and understand that which we do not. Goths have often been vilified by a society that misunderstands them, but when you realize that different does not mean dangerous, then you begin to see the genuine human with their own desires and fears. Take a look at deep sea life. In the deepest darkness of the ocean lie the most freaky looking, grotesque, and often downright creepy creatures that nature has to offer. Yet, there is an odd beauty that is found in this. Like postmodern goth art in nature, there is a beauty in the darkness of the sea. Like the creatures that live in the sea, there is beauty in the darkness of our lives. The freaky, morbid, and creepy things that we like to avoid are part of this world, just as much as flowers and puppies and butterflies and kittens are, and contribute to the beauty of existence in their own special way. There is no world without them. The last example of dark beauty that I will use is fitting because it is likely to be many of our final destination: cemeteries. They have a morbid beauty about them. The decaying statues and tombstones, the stories that each individual grave tells, and the fact that they are where we bury our dead, making them the final resting place for those that we love, making them painfully connected to our lives in a somber yet oddly harrowing way. Having lost a loved one recently, I find myself visiting the cemetery periodically and simply looking at the graves. Soldiers, teachers, husbands, wives, rich people, poor people, even infants. Death truly comes for all of us. There is this Twitter page that gives you daily reminders that you will die someday. Death is the darkness that we all avoid, in spite of knowing that it is always there. We must face the Reaper instead of fearing him, knowing that we cannot escape from him and accepting it as a reality of life. That is true courage, a courage that only comes from seeing beauty in the dark, seeing beauty in what we fear. That is the beauty in darkness. Thank you very much for watching. This is AJ with The Art of Overthinking. Hope you guys have a creepy, lovely, and beautiful Spookmas. Have a good one. Peace.